And welcome back to RGR Football. We're checking in with Matt Derrick. As you guys know, hit the like and the sub and the bell stuff. We have to do this every week. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing well, Ryan. How about yourself?
I'm awake. I'm eagerly awaiting mandatory minicamp and that everybody can scatter at that point. We will see this at a point where I'm very concerned about the way things are going at a couple of positions. And I want to get quickly your take on how you feel the offensive line progression, the battles, the back and forth.
For OTAs and even minicamp for the defensive line and the offensive line, they are incidental players. I mean, they're just basically running through dry runs because there's no hitting. There's nothing of that nature. You can't do any techniques, for the most part. The only thing you're probably doing is, all you can do is pick up bad habits this time of year. But, you're seeing at least a consistent front five and seeing Creed Humphrey this early at that center spot tells you that they want him to play this year and to be that starting center. And if that's the case, then I think it tells you that they're feeling really, really good about Creed Humphrey and what he could do.
Well, and luckily the Chiefs are in a situation where, unlike the Green Bay Packers, they have their quarterback in OTAs and learning to get with those guys, particularly the center, like you put that out. So that turns me towards Patrick himself. And I think we heard, I can't remember when it was, but it was earlier in the offseason when they first got back together, how he said that, I took a look at the Super Bowl a couple of times and I have some things to fix. Given that it's gelling, and that we're feeling confident about the way it's not only on paper, the talent of each individual lineman, but the five as a unit. Where does that take Patrick? In your mind, what does he need to do to adjust his game, especially given what we can expect in deep defenses, cover 3s and 4s, where people try to emulate the Bucs? What does that line allow him to do to change his game? What would you like to see him do first?
Yeah, and I imagine there's going to be a lot of Chiefs fans who don't want to hear this. So I'm sorry, I'm going to make some people probably unhappy right now. But I think I think that Mahomes has probably finally realized that he is going to have to change his game a little bit if his goal is going to be to try and play as many as 17 games a year for as many years as he wants to play. Because if he wants to do that, he's realizing he can't take some of the hits and some of the risks that he takes. And, and I think even, certainly you look back at the Super Bowl, a consistent message from him from even immediately after the game up until right now has been that he put too much on himself, that he was not making quick enough decisions. He wasn't getting rid of the ball when he needed to. He was scrambling too much. I mean, those are all things that are going to put him at risk in the long term. And honestly, if you want to keep Patrick Mahomes healthy, upright, all these things, building him an offensive line to protect him is a big deal. But you know what? There's still a limit to how much they can do. He's going to have to take some of that protection of his body on himself. And that means, making the right reads, checking down when he has to, taking what the defenses are giving him rather than just forcing it. Yeah. And that was really the thing that he felt was the flaw against the Bucs, that from his standpoint. Was just that, he tried to force too much and didn't take the little things that the Bucs were giving him and tried to make too many big plays. I mean, that's what, guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and John Elway eventually learned to do. Now you're seeing Mahomes make that move. It's not that he can't make the spectacular plays, and he's still going to. And it's not that he can't scramble, and he's still going to. But to put himself, repeatedly at risk and making some of the plays that he's made in the past, those are things he wants to get away from because he knows that, and he's getting more comfortable with the fact that, he's got 10 guys in the field with him and they can help him make plays too.
Well, for me, the thing comes down to, and he mentioned that, it's not about what I hear a lot of fans asking about, is Andy going to adjust the way he calls the game? Is he going to run the ball more deliberately? My answer is no. He's going to still call the same volume of passes and, most importantly, RPOs. And that's what brings me to my next topic, because it's up to Patrick to make that determination. And if we do see lighter boxes continue for him, for me, that's decision point number one for protecting himself and just taking what you're given. If you can get 4 or 5 yards by just letting the ball run, I think that's the number one thing that I want to see. A, do you think that makes sense? B, do you think it'll actually happen?
Yeah, I think it will, because I think that there were a couple of moments last year that were probably learning point games from Mahomes in that standpoint, and the Super Bowl was one of them, which is that you're absolutely right, is that, and Andy Reid will tell you too, that, hey, there are going to be certain times that with the way that they build their offense and the way that they use the RPOs, you know what, you're going to have some games every once in a while that turn into run heavy games that maybe you didn't plan that way. You're going to have some games that turn into pass heavy games and maybe you didn't plan that way. What you've got to do to avoid, though, is making the decision that's wrong for that game. You're absolutely right. I mean, if Mahomes had turned a few more of those RPOs into runs, then he's not running for his life as much. Maybe they are picking up those 3 or 4 yards to just move the chains, keep possession, do some of those things. That's kind of the things that you have to do. And, and that was there was more than a couple of times last year where the Chiefs got away from that. There were a few games, like I said, that really turned into run heavy games. Buffalo, a great example of that, where it does happen the other way. But, it is not going to change the way Andy Reid calls a game. He is still going to put the ball in the decision in the hands of his quarterback because he trusts Mahomes to make those decisions. I think you're just going to see, Mahomes increasingly realize that he needs to lean more on that run game in the RPO aspect if this offense is going to be able to do what they want to do.
Yeah. I think longevity, you mentioned it earlier. That's the thing for me that I think has to be paramount for Patrick. As we see what we expect the cap to do in the next few years, I mean, I'm hearing some awfully lofty numbers, but at that point, it makes Patrick's contract not the burden that it is at this point, and having to continually roll over and convert and get that cap space back. But for me, like you said, what do we still have 9 years under contract at this point, right? Or am I underselling that? Is it 10?
It's 10 or 11.
Yeah, right. Okay, so minimum 10. So we're talking, if he does it right and he runs the ball enough to avoid major injury, let's protect that toe for a while. We're talking 200 games if his goals go to mine and they play in the Super Bowl continually. That's a career that I think would be astounding if he can make that happen. And it does come back to his decision-making. At the end, Patrick's in charge of not only this team's future, but his own in terms of survivability.
Yeah, I mean, and you consider what I think Mahomes' goals are as far as long term and everything, and with the addition of the extra game in the playoffs, and honestly, with a few of the tweaks that have happened with the postseason and probably will happen with the postseason going forward. I mean, if the Chiefs are going to be a team who's going to play deep every single year, and with Game 17, Mahomes is going to have an entire season's worth more of tread on his tires at this point than quarterbacks of past generations. I mean, it's just what's going to happen. And 17 games, 20 games is a hard season to get through. I mean, at the preseason, I mean, that's 23 games if you're going to win a Super Bowl, if you're going to try and play through. It's a long, long slog of a season. If you're going to do that, you got to protect yourself. I mean, and I think that's just one of the things you're just starting to hear from Mahomes. And like I said, I don't think it's going to change his mentality. I mean, I think he's let's face it. I mean, he's competitive by nature, so he's still going to do the things that he does. But I just think that you're going to see a different decision-making process from him that evolves, where he's going to be realizing more and more to lean on the players around him and not have to put as much on his shoulders that he has to.
I think that's really interesting. It makes me wonder, after going through a full OTA, for the normality of it anyway, like you said, it's mostly a passing camp, even through mandatory minicamp, it's going to be that way. But does that make me think that maybe there's a scenario or an argument to be made, at least, that Patrick, of all people, doesn't need preseason games? Is there something now with only having 3 that diminishes the need to have that, let's come together for a quarter or a half with the actual starters on game 3? Like, does that change that? And could we maybe see the toe as an excuse to not see Patrick in the preseason?
It's entirely possible. I would not put it past Andy. I do know that he does feel like those preseason games have some value, for guys as just far as knocking off rust, getting the timing down. And, and last year, Reid was pretty critical of, at least for him, of what he thought that football looked like early in the season when you didn't have the off season, you didn't have the preseason games, that he thought that September was rough. And so I think he's still going to want to get those starters out there. It's going to change. I mean, with the 3 preseason games, game 3 is going to be mostly the backups, if not entirely backups, which means your starters are probably going to be playing the first 2 games. And even at that, might only get 3 or 4 quarters. That's still enough time to knock off a little bit of that rust, get some timing down. But the vast majority of the work is still going to be what happens during camp. So, yeah, I mean, it would not surprise me at all if, depending on how that recovery is going and how Mahomes feels, that he decides he doesn't need a preseason. But it wouldn't surprise me, too, if he just got him out there, even for a few series, just to be able to get some of that timing down.
Yeah, I'm going to vote along the series line. We'll see what happens. Folks, Chiefs Digest is where you can find everything, along with KC Sports Report. Matt, thanks for all the time, as usual, keeping us on the straight and narrow.
Anytime, Ryan. Take care, my friend.
Folks, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.